Product leadership is awesome. The question is, how can you become a product leader who is influential? And can you actually call yourself a leader without influencing others' careers for the better? The question becomes even more challenging when we discuss female leadership in product management, as we are about to do in today's Product Book Club webinar. By the way, I'm Maria Cassis, founder and general manager of Product League, and we help you to become the best product manager you can be. Product League is an international mentoring program for product managers by product managers in 30 countries, from Uganda to California, from Israel to New Zealand, and everywhere in between. In this Product Book Club, we will guide you step by step through the process of lifting one each other. Leadership 101 for female product leaders. One book, one author, two leaders who will join us on this stage to ask great questions. And of course, so many questions from you in the audience. And we really want to get to know you better. So please go ahead and tell us in the comment section who you are, where you're from, and what is your wonder when it comes to female product leadership. So we'll turn this event into our little product party. And now let's start by meeting our author and book for today. Joining us live from New York, Michelle Ferguson, fractional CEO and strategic advisor and founding member of Chief. Her book, Women Mentoring Women, was published in 2022 and is our book for this Product Book Club. And I'm so excited to have you here with us today.
And I'm so excited to be here.
What's up, Michelle?
It's a good day. It's actually the anniversary of publishing my book, so it's a big day for me.
Meant to be. Can I say it's just meant to be?
Perfect.
Meant to be. Yeah. So glad to have you on our floor. So happy for the opportunity to discuss this subject matter, this important and critical subject matter with the audience. And before we start, before anything else, I want to say thank you. I want to thank you for coming here today and sharing your wisdom and book with us. And we are going to discuss this book with two of our mentors. So what do you say? Shall we call them in? Shall we introduce them?
Come on.
Let's do that. Also joining us are Ashley DiGinelli, Senior Product Manager at Media.com and Product League Mentor, and Brooke Sugarman, Product Manager and Founder at Falcon Expenses and Product League Mentor. What's up?
Hi. Hello.
Hello, Brooke. Hello, Ashley. So happy to have you here with us. This is like a Product Ladies Day. So happy to have you here. And I have to say, Brooke, it took us some time to have you on our floor. You are a veteran mentor with us, but it's only the first time that you are here with us. And so I'm so proud for the opportunity that we finally.
I'm really excited.
Super excited. And of course, Ashley, for you, this is not I don't know, it's not even the fourth time, I think, but it's always a pleasure. And you always bring such a big smile and the best attitude with us. So I'm convinced that together with you, Michelle, Ashley, and Brooke, this is going to be a wonderful event. And as I said to everyone just before, let us know who you are. Use the comment section wherever it is that you watch us right now, YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and let us know what is your question or wonder or challenge or anything else. What comes to your mind or your heart when we discuss product management leadership for female? Okay, so this is a wonderful topic with so many questions, and this is why we're meeting here today to discuss a specific book, Women Mentoring Women, your book, Michelle. We're going to discuss this book. We all read it here, okay? Hopefully many of the ladies and guys as well in the audience will read it as well, okay, following this session. So we've got great questions. I'm convinced that you have great answers, and we'll have a wonderful discussion, because this is a big challenge to all, right? Female product leadership, how to do it, how to support others, but also supporting ourselves at the same time without feeling guilty for doing that. This is a big one. So we're going to start, and Brooke, how about we'll start with one of your questions?
Sure. So, Michelle, I had a really great time reading your book. And one of the questions that I had was, you mentioned that like sometimes when you have the mentor has a mentee, the mentee doesn't necessarily have any goals for their career or growth defined before the relationship starts. So it's also something I've personally experienced as a mentor. And I was just wondering, like, what are some tips that you have in order to help the mentee identify, define, and refine their I guess, SMART goals or goals for their relationship?
That's a great question because I am all about the goals, right? Because right, if you don't know where you're going, like any road will take you there. So I think
Yeah.
there's right two sets of goals, right? So the first, maybe the easier one to start with, is what are the goals for the partnership? And I will tell you, one of the things that I see is often the goal of the mentee is to have a mentor, which I think perhaps isn't a lofty enough goal. So I think this is where a mentor can help. And it's like to ask the why questions there, right? And get a little bit, it's like, you know, do you want a mentor to be able to tick off the box? Like it's sort of a waste of a mentor to do that, right? So, you know, and in pulling the onion back to figure that out, you're going to get into their bigger life goals, right? And I think sometimes what they'll be able to do is they'll have something vague, like I want to grow as a product manager, right? And then the question to her is, okay, let's drill down on that, right? Is there something particular that you need to learn? Are there experiences you need to have? So I think it's, you know, almost it's more about drilling down on the goals and then making them SMART goals. So again, something vague like I want a promotion, right? I want to work for a bigger company, right? It's like fine, right? But specific, I want to go from a product manager to a director, right? I'd like to go from being an individual contributor, just managing product, to managing people, right? So getting specific, right? Something to measure, right? Like new title, more direct reports, more revenue, more whatever, right? Actionable, they can actually do something about it, like specific on the results, and then a timeline. Like I'd like to move from an individual contributor to managing a team of 5 within 18 months, right? And then that can help form the basis for your relationship. Is once you have the goal, then you can like sort of frame your conversations around it.
I love that. I want to thank you both, Brooke, for asking the question and Michelle for actually answering it. Because one of the things that we force, and I mean it when I'm saying force, our mentees to do on basically day 1 or 2 of getting into our journey with us at Product Leg, is to write down their SMART goals. And then it's also, about the nitty gritty, like the little things. Okay, you want to get a promotion, but what kind of promotion? Like you just said, Michelle. But it's also about the more soft goals of our work, because sometimes it's something as simple as I want to feel like I'm like people hear me at the office. And then it's like, okay, so what will make you feel this way? For example, it can be for the team to adopt one of my ideas once in 2 months. Like once in 2 months, feeling that something that I just proposed is getting accepted. Or like the other things, because this is why, Brooke, this is why you're asking that, because this is such an important matter. And even though we're doing every batch, this is not easy, and we need to like really force our mentees to do so. And even then it's not easy, because SMART goals require us all to kind of like take a deeper look into our goals and ask ourselves, okay, but why do I want that? Like, what is it about that will make me scream or dance in my chair saying, yeah, I got it, like I made it? The little things. So, Brooke, thank you so much for this question. And Michelle, thank you for your answer. I love that. Ashley.
Yeah, I think for me, like one of the chapters I found myself going back to after I finished the book right away was the work-life blending chapter. I thought that was a really interesting way of putting it. I'm a caregiver for my spouse, and so for me especially, I find that like keeping my work between the hours of 8 to 5 doesn't necessarily work the best for me on a day-to-day basis. So I really loved when you talked about putting everything back towards your values. And I'd love to know, what advice do you have for someone who's trying to do that but maybe struggling?
Yeah. I mentioned in the book, this was one of the harder chapters for me to write because it took me a really long time to get it right. And I also had a really hard time finding stories from people who got it right? So it is, the first thing is you're not alone. And I actually found that one of the things that was most helpful to me accidentally was like getting clear on my values and writing them down. And I have, I was talking about the 3x5. I have a card on my desk, right? And I've always said my family came first. Always said that. Most of my career, that didn't play out too well. And so now when I'm faced with the decision, I can look at the card, right? And it will like, it's the physical cue for me. The other thing, and the reason I talked about blending is I think often we think it's an either or proposition, right? And a lot of times you can do both if you get creative. So I love doing talks like this. And I got approached about one on a day that I was supposed to be watching my granddaughter. And so I was like, okay, I have to say no, right? Because my value. And then it's, well, I could probably cue it up that to be on a Zoom for an hour. I can do the appropriate bribery with her, make sure that the person on the other side knows, right, that this is, I'm going to try to keep her quiet, but she's a 3-year-old, right? But it also models the behavior I'm looking for, right? That, right, we're living in this world that things blend. And I do feel for you as a caregiver because I had the same thing, right? That it is, especially if that person is your number one priority, right? How do you sort of blend that? And I think some of it is I think especially as women tend to be perfectionists, like dialing it down on both sides on, is good enough, right? So, right, not giving medication is probably unacceptable, right? But are there other things that you could either outsource or maybe just don't have to get done on both sides, right? That just, we do it to ourselves. And sometimes it's as basic as we're assuming, again, whether it's the person in our personal life or at work, that they're expecting something. And it's getting clear, right? Like it's about communication. Like it may be actually annoying. Like, it's like, you're checking on me a little too often. And like, I don't like, right? It's like to say, do you need me? Right? Do you want me to do that? Or would you be happy doing that on your own? So, does that help you?
Yes, very much so. I always like to say I'm a recovering perfectionist. I think it was ingrained in me in school, and now like it's not good enough to just chase a goal, right? Like I think that's something a lot of women struggle with, is like, oh, I want that. And then the second you have it, you're like, well, now I need a new thing to go chase because.
Yeah, and I mentioned in the book, I once got the guidance, right, that sometimes good enough is good enough, that everything doesn't have to be done perfectly, right? There are a lot, like, maybe the house isn't spotless, right? Maybe you're not meant to be a size 2. Yeah.
And that's more than fine.
Yes. Yeah.
I love that. And actually, you are not alone. We just ran a poll on our LinkedIn page just yesterday. It's still running. So everyone who wants to vote, you can still do that. Go to our LinkedIn page and do so. Asking, what is the biggest challenge of being a female product leader in 2023? With 75% of the audience choosing work-life blending. Your copy, Michelle. Work-life blending as the biggest struggle or challenge. This is a big one. And it's time to recall another part of from your book, Michelle, with the wonderful quote by Barbara Walters saying, most of us have trouble juggling. The woman who says she doesn't is someone whom I admire. but have never met. This is a really important one from the book. Yeah, it's a good reminder. We all struggle with that. And this is why we're supposed to talk about that, right? To help us with the struggle. Thank you both, Ashley and Michelle. Brooke, I'm sure you have another question in store.
Sure. So when I was reading the book, like one of the things that stood out was how you mentioned that it's really important for mentors to have a growth mindset in addition to the mentees. And I think this is something that's really important for like all mentors to learn about. So I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit on what you mean by growth mindset. Like I'm always learning from my mentees. I feel like it goes both ways. And I was just curious what you meant by growth mindset for the mentor.
Right. It's, being open to, right, that you can always learn and grow, right, in every aspect of your life. And I think, and it's not, you either have a growth mindset or a fixed, right? It's on a continuum, right? And maybe you have more of a growth mindset in certain aspects of your life and less in others, but to be intentional about like almost every conversation, every interaction, like what can I learn from this? And not that I believe mentoring relationships, right, should be focused on the development of the mentee. But again, it's not an either or, right? So I think a lot of mentors they're by nature selfless individuals. So it's like, I'm doing this, the first time I did it, it's like, I'm doing it to give back. And then I kind of tripped into, oh, I'm actually learning something, right? And I also heard that from other mentors. And then I went one step further and said, instead of like, again, accidentally learning something, can I be intentional and just go in it with my mind that almost like I'm not leaving the conversation until it might be that I learn more about my partner, or I look at something a different way, or I learn to ask a better question, right? And I think it's right. It makes you, it also, you can almost use your mentoring as practice, not that you're mentee is a guinea pig, right? For how to be a better leader, because most of the things that make you,
yeah, I like how you called it a partnership,
right? Most of the things that make you a great mentor will make you a great leader. So are you asking like great questions? Are you listening? Can you be collaborative? Can you be concerned about the development of another human being? So yeah, so I think it's just most of it's mindset. It's like, where is your head? And can in every interaction every day, can I end the day as a better person than I started it? And the interaction as a better person.
Thank you very much. And I think this is a time to discuss, Brooke, following up on your great question, to discuss why should product leaders, mentors, should be somewhat of selfish, so-called, okay, in this endeavor, because it's not just about goals, it's also about what happens. Let's discuss this for a second, because this is something that we don't discuss enough as a community. What happens when you don't receive supposedly anything from your mentoring experience with your mentee from this relationship?
Well, I'd like to
as
say
a mentor.
that,
Yeah.
that mentoring relationships don't fail, but to me, that's a fail, right? If you don't, because and I would think the only way you're not going to learn from the relationship is if you're not open to it. If you're not open, if you don't have that growth mindset to say, I can learn, right? Because sometimes we get a little bit egotistical, like I'm senior to this person, I have more experience, whatever, right? What can I possibly learn? And my experience is you can learn from anybody, right? If you're open to it. So I think the only way you're not going to learn is if you're not open. And it may be, and being open to it may be an unexpected kind of thing, right? Unexpected learning, right? Because you can have goals, right? Okay, I'm going to mentor somebody in a different industry or a different function to get exposure to that. But what you might learn is sort of an insight from a different culture, right? Or you might learn of a great book, right? Like there are a lot of different things. So being really open to the learning might not be what you think it's going to be.
Or it's about learning how to turn around or dealing with a difficult relationship as well. When it's the other person doesn't have to listen to you. It's like different than the office when we have like, a challenging conversation or relationship there.
Right. And I think it also helps you, right? If your mentee has a different background, like we tend to approach problems and problem solving, like based on our background, right? So the mentee I talk about in the book, Gaina, she has a math undergrad, right? And a law degree. So by virtue of that background, like there's something about like a math person who's very analytical, like she's going to go about things differently. But I also manage people who are like more like her. So it gives me it's like, okay, I can ask her a little bit more what's going behind your thinking. You might not want to do that with your team, right? Whereas with your mentee, it's like, oh, let's dissect that a little bit. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the challenges that we have in Product League is, one of the rules that we have at Product League is that we do matching using the algorithm and nothing else. Like there is no one is looking into it. No one is asking like specific requirements. There is like an algorithm, and in the algorithm we trust. And we have 99% of success with it. But that means that about 2 like pairings a batch are not as successful as the others. And whenever it happens, like when the mentor asks me, okay, what about that? So I say, okay, we have 2 options. We can switch and like do things differently, or we can ask ourselves, how can we actually grow as leaders because of the challenging aspect? Because you had like this dream, this vision in your mind when you will have a mentee, will you like grab lunch together to have the most amazing time? And then it becomes different, and the other person is challenging you, and it's not easy, and it's surely not always fun, but can we actually grow out of that, both the mentor and the mentee?
I think that's a great point, because I think both on the mentee and the mentor side, it's nature that we like people like ourselves, right? And so a lot of times we're looking in a partner to someone who's a mirror image, right? They're in the same function, the same industry. And depending on what the developmental needs of the mentee, right? Right. So maybe it's a marketing manager, right? My guess is the marketing manager probably got marketing figured out. Like they may need I need help managing a team. I need help influencing and negotiating, right? And it may be, right, that she finds some whiz-bang marketing person who's really senior, but doesn't have those skills and experiences, right? So I think that's where the algorithm helps. It focuses on, right, what's deep down, not what's on the surface. Like, what does the mentee need? What can the mentor contribute? Not, you look like me.
Absolutely. And it also takes away the bias that we all have of like picturing leaders in a specific way. So it's not just about, the world outside picturing leaders as male. Okay. It's also about us as a community of professionals picturing the leaders as people who work in certain companies or hold specific titles. And leadership comes in a variety of titles and companies and experiences and all of that.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's about leadership. It's about taking our biases aside, just taking them off, and saying, I'm looking into the potential. I'm looking into the goals of what I want. And then I help the other person, whether the mentee or the mentor, to reach their goals, because it's also on the mentee's end to ask themselves, how can I be of help to my mentor? What is this thing that I can share with them? Maybe this is an insight, like reminding them how it is to be, a junior at the office. Right? Like they probably, we sometimes tend to forget how it is. We should say that. So sometimes when someone else coming in and reminding us that, it's a good thing. Maybe it's a new initiative or like new technology or just a trick that we do not know. So it's also on the mentee's end to find this mini leadership within them, and then proposing something that they can assist the mentor with. Brooke, thank you very much for making this very insightful and like interesting
You're
discussion
welcome.
going with your question. Thank you, Ashley. I'm sure you have a wonderful question of your own.
I actually have a follow-up to the idea of selfish mentoring. I'd love to know how, I was reading your book and I honestly felt like I was like, oh, like Michelle is basically calling me out here. I'm not very good at that. Now I know something.
We didn't want to tell you, but you are the star of the book, Ashley. It's all about you. Isn't it amazing that we all like reading it? It's like, okay, I know this problem. I know what she's talking about.
It's probably the best feedback I've gotten on the book, right? Like it felt like it was talking to me.
Yeah. I'd love to know what you recommend. Like, how can we hold ourselves accountable to selfish mentoring? Like, how do we take an opportunity like the one that you had that allowed you to sort of get mentored by your mentee? Like how do we hold ourselves accountable to allowing for that to happen?
Honest to God, goals, right? Write it down, right? Right? Like, what have I learned? Like go into the session saying, I'm going to learn something, and then like write it down, right? And maybe have someone else hold you accountable for it, right? Someone else, another mentor in the program, right? But I do think it's about setting the goal and measuring. And you know what? Product managers know how to do that. Like set a goal and track your results.
Drop the mic, Michelle. Yeah.
Well, I do think, right? Like, and share it with your partner, right? Like, be open, right? Like that I'm concerned about your development, but I also, right, know that I need to develop. I mean, and I think that shows leadership too, right? That you're open to learning, right? And, I think the other thing with the goals is you can keep them front and center as you start as you prepare for the conversation and you have it, right? So if you just have like, let's just revisit our goals, right? And make sure that what you're doing ties in. If one of your goals is mutual learning, you got a better chance if you've agreed that, right? And you agreed it up front, then maybe your mentee comes in armed with something to help you with. Because I do think, right, they want to help you and they want to give back, right? So give them that opportunity.
I love them. Give them that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Ashley. Now, Michelle, Ashley, and Brooke, are you up for a challenge? May I challenge you?
Okay.
I'll take it as a very quiet yes, but enthusiastic one. Okay, so we're talking about leadership. We're talking about mentoring. We're talking about female product leaders in the community. Let's talk about tips and tricks, and how about each one of us sharing one do and one don't when it comes to leadership. Because here's the thing: we have many already leaders in the audience. Okay, the data shows that most of the people that actually watch us right now are already higher ranked up there on the career ladder. But there are also juniors that watch us right now. And I'll tell you a secret: even us leaders need some inspiration and guidance. So how about one tip when it comes to leadership, especially female leadership? One do and one don't stay away from. Who wants to start? I told you it's going to be a challenge. I warned you.
I'll go.
Yes.
I think Michelle, you brought this up in your book, and I was like really it put a smile on my face when I read it, because I was a former competitive athlete, and that really taught me a lot about team. And I think team is really important to leadership. And I don't think I've ever seen it written next to each other, like the team and the leadership, like the way you wrote it. So I think it's really important for leaders to be team players. You're not just on top. And so I guess that kind of goes into the don't, which is that don't assume that you know everything. And that goes into that's why I asked the growth mindset question. The don't is is that you know the answers. You can always learn. You learn from both sides, and leaders learn as well from their team.
I
So
love that.
the don't is don't assume you know everything, and the do is the team.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you very much, Brooke. And I love the fact that we're talking about leadership and like, if to summary what you're saying, it's about team. It's like we're talking about leadership and we can, accept us all to talk about the individuals, and you chose to talk about team, which is fantastic. I love that. I love it very much. Thank you very
Yeah.
much, Brooke. Michelle, Ashley.
I'll jump in. So I think my do is the further you move up the ladder, I think the more important your communication skills become both ways, right? And I think for leaders, and Brooke sort of alluded to this, that means getting really good at listening, right? And asking great questions, and creating an environment where people are willing to ask the hard questions. So I do think the further up you get, right, like it's really about communication. And I think the don't is, don't rely on your credentials, right? Like whatever they are, right? It's like, it's really interesting. Or the past, like people are like, they introduce themselves. I've got this degree from this school and I have 20 years experience. It's like, and right? Like, what have you learned? Like you know what? I never would have grown up wanting to be a product manager because there was like that animal, it didn't exist, right? So like, don't be like tied up on whatever. I'm I'm the, chief product officer, or I worked at Google. Don't. Yeah, just don't.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. Thank you so much. I love that. Ashley.
All right, my do is I believe in servant leadership. I think the more you grow in your career, the more responsibility you have, the more accountability you have to the people that you're really supporting. And to me, like the best leaders are the ones who put their team first, like Brooke was saying. Like I think to me, the higher up you go, the more you're managing other people, the more your focus has to be about their development, right? Like that's your measure of success. It's no longer about yourself or can you get the job done? It's can I help someone else reach the next level of their career, and can I help them grow, and can I help point them in the right direction? Even if that right direction means they walk away from the company we're both in right now. I've had leaders support me there and kind of give me a little nudge in the right direction if I wasn't maybe brave enough to do it by myself. So I think that's the do. And the don't is like, don't waste your time being afraid of something. Like to me, a book I read in college that my friends and I still like will text each other occasionally about it, was like, feel the fear and do it anyway. So like do things afraid, because if you're not doing them afraid, you're probably not doing anything to let yourself grow. And fear is just like our instinctual response, but you have 100% success rate in life. Like you've made it through everything that life has thrown at you so far. So just do it afraid.
Wonderful. Just wonderful. Thank you very much, Ashley. And I will share two of my own. So my do is make sure you enjoy the ride. With climbing up the ladder comes responsibility and accountability and so many things that get us to have a headache. So we have to make sure that we still enjoy what we do. It can be a big thing and it can be the little things. Just make sure that you include on your day-to-day or in the big picture some things that make you proud and full of energy and joy when it comes to your profession. So this is my do. And my don't is don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. There is nothing, no task that is beneath us. Okay. And if sometimes we find ourselves in need to do something that usually like a junior person is doing or whatever, that's fine, because guess what? That's part of the job. And going back, Michelle, to what you said, it's never about the title. Title is bullshit, pardon my French. So, you know, get your hands dirty, do the work, get it done. So these are my do and my don't. And thank you very much, ladies, for this wonderful, spot on pieces of wisdom that we shared with the audience. Now, who is ready for more questions following the book?
Bring them.
Yes, Ashley and Brooke. Who wants to take the next one?
I have a question. I have a
yeah.
good one.
Good.
You can go. Oh, well, I was, since we're talking about women and female product leaders, you mentioned in the book about how you had some cases where the female mentee took on two mentors, a man and a woman, in order to observe bias. So in case there was, and also because it could benefit them if they're looking to be mentored in a direction that's dominated by men. But I think my questions is what are some of the common biases that you've observed through that particular case study? I'm sure a lot of us know of some of them, but also how did the more, I think, interesting would be is how did those biases influence the mentee's outcome, like their direction that they took towards their goals?
Right. Well, and I think, one of, the examples I use in the book is this being assertive or being aggressive, right? Right. Like,
yeah,
the behavior comes from a male, it's seen as assertive, which is a positive thing. And if it's from a woman, it's aggressive, right? Like the ambitious bit, right? Like I've never heard a guy being accused of being too ambitious, right? Like I thought ambition was a good thing, right? So there, like if a mentor is vulnerable, right? The male might say, right, and might see it a little bit more, as there are some men who might see that as too aggressive of a stand. I mean, the reality of it is that's the way it's perceived. Like that's their reality. And you can choose to proceed along the path you were going to, but just being aware of how the other side might see it. I mean, I know one of the biggest ahas for me is if I look back at some of the mentoring I did maybe 15 years ago, I was giving people advice to be women, and some of them not white women, to be like more like white guys. That was because it's quite right. And I think now if I had to do it again, what I might say is, right, you have to choose which battle you want to fight here. Do you want to be, I had a leader once who said to me, do you want to be right or effective? So sometimes it's more, you want to be effective. So it might be, you have to be less than authentic to be effective. Right. And so I think that's the asking that question on which is more important to you, because the reality of it is any two people communicate differently, right? It could be two white women who communicate differently. So I do think there's, right. And there are these like, the biases. A buddy of mine posted something, right, that like all Asians are smart, like, right. And we sort of have to, like, British people sound smart, right? Like people with Southern accents, right? Like we all, and some of us were raised with that, right? So it's almost, getting to the point that you check it yourself and check it in other people. Does that help you, Brooke? I don't know if
yeah.
Right. Just different people.
We've all faced it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and just the way we tend, I ended up with something in the summer of 2020, ended up in a Slack community getting in the middle of a little bit of racial tension between the Black women in the group and the white women in the group. And, there was, a comment about the silence from the white women is deafening. And some of us started making excuses. Like, it's like, you did something at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday night, and I would write the better. And I tried to apologize and tried to make it better, which I didn't. And I was pleased that someone else gave me the feedback. It's like, would you like a better way, like a better approach to dealing with that? It's like, yeah, 100%. Like, I don't want to be yelled at about it. And she's like, maybe just say you heard them. Right. And so I was kind of answering it from like where my head was, but I needed to answer it from where someone else's was. So having someone to talk to who would hear it the same way was helpful. Maybe that's more practical, right? Is maybe to just talk to someone who's more like the person you're trying to communicate with to see how it would be received. Because we all have those. We all have unconscious bias. We just do. Right.
Yeah, it's part of human nature.
Yeah. The women should be the caregivers, right?
Thank you. But it's also a good opportunity to mention that some of us are more vocal and some of us are less. And some of us, I don't want to call it aggressive, so I'll just call it assertive. So some of us are more assertive and some of us are less. And all is welcome, because there is no one way to be a leader. And sometimes leadership is needed in one place in like very assertive manner or passion. And sometimes it's the quiet person, who does everything with a smile that gets results. So there is a place. We need leaders, and we need leaders of all genders and all kinds and all communication choices or practices. Some are more vocal, some are less. We just need people to lead and make the world a better place, if I may use this somewhat of overused sentence. Absolutely. Actually, before we are back to you with another question, there is a wonderful question submitted by the audience, and I would like us all to answer it. So this one comes from Helena, and she's asking, how do you influence the fulfillment of the roadmap in tight economic times? How do you prioritize? Now, I'll give to it a bit more context as to leadership. So Helena is here asking a beautiful question, saying, okay, so there was a plan, there is a roadmap, but things happen, and there is a major change. How do you prioritize things differently, and how do you communicate that to the team? Because only then we can actually fulfill that as a team together. So Helena, let me know if that was a nice or okay rephrasing of your question. And Ashley, how about you answer it first?
Sure. So I think as a product manager, we have two main responsibilities, right? Move the business forward and represent and support our users and be the voice of our customers. So I think if you're in a position where you can tell that story of why the roadmap needs to change, how it ties back to moving the business forward, how it ties back to the voice of your customer, everyone's going to get on board a lot faster and a lot smoother. This to me is where I think one of the most underrated skills a PM can have is storytelling. We have to do it all the time to every audience in the company, right? Whether it's a junior engineer or our CEO, explain why we need to take a certain approach. I think to me, it comes down to how do you tell the story of why that's happening without just relying on, hey, look, the economy is a little rough right now, so we're going to do this, right? For us, something we've had to do is really focus on different tactics this quarter than we were planning to. And so part of the conversation we've had there is like, we need to focus on these because it'll move our first metric that we care about in the right direction. And like, this is the specific goal that we have. This is how much we think this one project that we're putting in the roadmap is going to move it. This is why it's moving everything else out. So I think it comes down to being able to tell this story and prioritizing based on the business and your customer and finding the right combination of meeting those two needs.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Ashley and Brooke, just to give you a glimpse into what we're discussing. So Helena here in the audience asked a beautiful question saying, okay, so we have a roadmap, but things are changing in the economy. So things are lifted in the roadmap. How to communicate that to the team, how to prioritize things differently, in a way that actually conveys leadership. So do you have any tip on how to do that? Brooke?
Sorry, I dropped off. I I got back
No
on.
worries, no worries. We were
No, it's
discussing
fine.
leadership. Did you hear my question?
I would like I agree with it. You need to tell a story, but I would also look at what how the also the value to the customers is changing as well with the dynamics of the market, and that would help me to prioritize the roadmap, because perhaps there's also changes in how people are using your product or their purchasing habits, and that would help me lead that direction, because I'm always looking to optimize the value for the customer, but also make sure to keep in mind your business value as well, your objectives. Both of them need to be aligned.
I love that. I love it, especially, bro, because leadership is about understanding that we're a part of ecosystem and like lifting everyone up. And then what you're saying is like, okay, it's not just about the product, it's also about the customers and about the users. So how can we lift them up within these circumstances, which is good leadership. So thank you very much for your answer. Ashley, I'm sure you know how to challenge Michelle next.
I actually had a question about the gender pay gap. I thought the chapter on that was really interesting, and it's great. And I think even in my own career, I've seen a lot of changes occur in the last like 10, 12 years around how compensation is approached and what the conversation is. But I wanted to ask if you feel that pay transparency and employees being open to sharing their salary, if that will actually help. I know when I first started, I remember employees being reprimanded at a company I used to work at years ago. I think it would never happen now, about not sharing pay and it's inappropriate and you shouldn't talk about it at work. And now, like, the idea of that is just, it sounds wild, right? Like that's, it just sounds wild now to reflect back and remember leaders telling us that.
I think pay transparency and real transparency is important. You know, I don't know how many of you, right? There's sort of the data, right? The whole damn lies and statistics, right? I've certainly seen it in looking for roles, right? I was approached about a role. I was told the range was between X and Y. I said, I'm looking for closer to Y, the high end. And they're like, well, we don't really pay people that. It's like, okay, that's, well, you probably do. You probably do, right? And it's like, give me the real range. And I think one of the sticky things we get into is defining compensation, right? Because a lot of the data is based on base salary. And the more senior you get, the more, I mean, there were certainly years that my bonus, stock options, exercising stock, right, exceeded my base salary. So you have to watch what you're measuring, all that like hidden stuff. And the other thing with the hidden stuff is not everybody knows about the hidden stuff, right? I was in an organization there. I thought, okay, only certain people, this was earlier in my career, only certain people get bonuses because there was a formal structure for bonuses for people over a certain range. And then I found out, oh, there are people who get them, right? And even when I was in that, I was on a project with somebody and, you know, I happened to be running payroll at the time, right? And I'm like, oh, I don't get anything extra for this because you never want to run payroll. I should get extra for this because it will work into my bonus as it is, like successful completion of this project, until someone else walked in and said, here's a bonus for somebody who, really my project, right? The person didn't work for me. It was one of these kind of things. Here's his bonus. And this was someone who was a peer of mine. And I'm like, and I suspect that's not the first time that manager gave the bonus or the first time that employee got one, right? So it's being open to like, what is compensation, right? And I'll tell you the most frustrating thing with the pay gap is we've been like talking about this for a long time, and it's narrowing really slowly, right? In fact, it like set back a little bit during COVID. So it's still the gender pay gap is still in those like 83, 84 cents on a dollar for women, right? And worse if you're in another underrepresented group. But I do think that transparency is, and transparency with the right data.
How will you, thank you actually for the questions. I actually want to follow on that. How do you start this kind of a conversation, Michelle? Like, we want people to open up about their salary, right? To actually share numbers or bulks, but it's really hard to get this conversation started, the discussion.
Yeah. And
so how can a mentor and mentee can do that?
Well, so I think this is where a mentor can help the mentee is that sometimes it's hard to get it out of your own organization, but there are other places to get it, right? And there are spreadsheets. I know Pavilion just a couple of months ago had one where people go in voluntarily and put their comp data. And again, you just have to make sure you're comparable in the comp, right? So is it another product manager in a similar sized organization in a similar geography, right? To be able to go in and when you have the conversation, right, it should never be about, well, I want more money because I want this. It's more about this is the appropriate compensation, right, for this role, right, for this role, and I'm not there. Or someone, again, as a manager, looking at the people who report to you, right, like almost control what you can, right, like, is it equitable even within your team? I'll bet if you aren't looking at stats, right, statistics say it probably isn't equitable, right?
So there is the pay gap discussion, right? What other kind of discussions should we initiate, either within, the mentor-mentee relationship or inside our teams or organizations? What other discussions should we bring to life in order to lead our community to a better future and possess leadership?
An interesting concept that I heard someone raise recently is often when we're hiring for a role, we are 100% focused on the best person for that role. And what I heard suggested was, right, so you have a team of analysts, right? So if it's an industry or function that's mostly white or mostly male or mostly straight or whatever, that's what the pool's going to be, right? So again, odds are that's what you're going to get as an answer. And it may be the best person for the role, maybe someone who's just like everybody else. But is that the best addition for the team? So would the team benefit by someone with whatever different perspective, different background, right? And like it could be something as silly as you're based in the US. Would there be benefits to having someone working in India who is working at a different time, right? Would it be right? So I think as a manager, right, to encourage people as they develop teams to look at like what the team looks at, not zeroing, because I'd never ever say that you should say, right, I need to hire a woman, I need to hire someone, who's I think, right. Because you know what, I'm one of those people who like had it thrown at me. The only reason you got that job is because you're a woman. It's like, you actually got the job in spite of the fact that I was a woman, right? So I don't want to be that person. I don't espouse that, but looking at like what's in the best interest of the team and the organization, and it's very good chance that different is better for the team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another discussion that we all have to get going is about wellness and mental health and taking care of ourselves and appreciate ourselves and love ourselves, right? Regardless of the title, Michelle, as you said earlier. So, what do you think is the tip or the advice that you would like either to like share with the audience who's now watching us, to inspire them, to give them, the piece of advice or guidance that they need, or something that we should discuss more as a community
So
within organizations or just overall? Yeah.
So if I had one thing that I wish I had talked about in the book that I didn't, it would have been wellness in all respects and how mentoring can support that, right? And it can be something as basic as, I think this might be in the book, it may not, right? I had heard a story of a mentoring partnership where the mentee couldn't set boundaries and stayed in the office all night. So the mentor, they scheduled their mentoring sessions in person outside the office, because once you're outside the office, you're not going to go back, right? Can you do, like, even if you're virtual, can you both take a walk at the same time, right? Do you respect not doing it at stupid hours, right? Right? Or be open if that's what they need, right? So I think there's some way, and just the act of taking the time for the mentoring partnership to make it a priority to say, even though everything is blowing up around me, I'm going to take this 30 minutes or hour to talk with someone about my own development or someone else's development, right? I'm going to take myself out of the craziness and focus on this for an hour. Like, just doing that, I think, is an act of supporting wellness.
Wisely said.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle. Ashley, I know that this subject of like wellness and taking care of ourselves and listening to ourselves is one that is dear to your heart. So what about you? What do you have to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so important to figure out what it is that helps you be your best. Like, I'm a firm believer, we can't take care of other people. We can't show up the way that we want to show up if we're not taking care of ourselves. So for some people, that means like they log on at 7 a.m. and they take like a 2-hour break, right? For me, it means I need like 2 hours before I start work in the morning to myself, to work out, take care of myself, walk my dog. So I'm not a 7 a.m. person. But I think that also like shifts over time. What I needed before I was a caregiver is very different than what I need now. And I think you have to be willing to define that for yourself, and also just like tell your team. I think the only way we get more comfortable talking about things and saying like, hey, I'm putting an hour lunch break on my calendar. I won't be available at that time. I'm blocking it. And make your calendar auto decline and say, I'm having lunch at this time, I'm not available, is really powerful and just sort of leads the way for other people to do the same thing. There's a few leaders in my org who block off time because they got to go pick up their kids, or it's the only time in the day they can get to the gym. And so they regularly put it on their calendar. And that sort of like, I think, gives the signal to everyone else. Everyone should be doing this. You should be taking care of yourself. So that's my best advice is like, one, put it in your calendar. Michelle talks about that in her book. And two, think about how you're best set up. Like, what are the days where you feel you're the most productive? Because you probably took care of yourself that day really well. And that's why you were able to get through so much work.
Absolutely. I love what you mentioned, Ashley. And I want to go back to one of the things that you mentioned, Michelle, in the book, that it's not about time management, it's about energy management, right? So Ashley, as you said, it's like if you are taking care of yourself, so you will have the energy to actually do the job, to do the work. So spot on. Thank you very much. Brooke, I'm sure you have something to add to this discussion.
For my
Everything
wellness,
so like, taking care of ourselves.
No, I'm just thinking because like I do like for the startup stuff, it's very hard because you're always working. So it's definitely forcing yourself or setting time aside to go to the gym, making sure, like, I like to make sure that I walk 10,000 steps a day, and always taking breaks. I like to, when I walk, sometimes I use Siri. I'll say, hey, Siri, set the timer for 10 minutes. I'll walk for 10 minutes out and then 10 minutes back. Those are some things that I do. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Very good. It's like the little things, even like the 10 minutes, as you mentioned, like it goes a long way.
It's hard though when you're doing a startup because it's things are
Yes.
moving really fast and it's all the time.
And you feel like it's the end of the world if you won't send this email right on time. Yeah. We know the
But I
drill.
also try to forgive myself if I get a little off balance sometimes with it. So I try to also be forgiving. Like it's okay if this week, I think that's really important. Like I didn't do, but I try not to make that a habit,
Yeah.
a regular
And by the
habit.
way,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a really important one, Brooke, because it goes back to not being a perfectionist unless you really have to be perfectionist. So it's also about
Mhm.
ourselves. It's not just about the work, right? If we had the goal of like walking, I don't know how many miles a week, and we skipped it for a week, so it's like it's okay.
It's
Even if you
okay.
have
Yeah.
like, yeah, like even if you just sat before of Netflix and ate like buckets of ice cream, that's what you needed that day. So
Yeah. You need
forgive
to
yourself
be
for
able to
taking
forgive
care of
yourself.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
important.
I love that. I love that. Thank you very much, Brooke. Ladies, I had the best time having you on our flow. How was it for you?
It's
Fabulous.
great.
Amazing.
I did sneak a few notes in myself. Yeah,
Best
it was
feedback
good.
ever. Best
Yeah.
discussion feedback ever. I love that. Thank you very much. Women Mentoring Women was our book for today. Thank you, Michelle Ferguson, the author, for sharing it with us. And special thanks go to our Product League mentors, Brooke Sugarman and Ashley DiGianelli, for asking great, to the point questions. Thank you, Product Ladies. I'm Maria Cassis. This is Product League. Thank you so much for watching us today. We can't wait for supporting you in becoming the best product manager you can be. Don't forget to join us for our next webinar. And until then, go hit the like button, subscribe, and watch the dozens of other great videos we have on our channel. League it up, leaguers. Have a fantastic day and lead. Just go and lead others and enjoy the ride and share your wisdom with mentees and with fellow mentors. Just lead away. Thank you very much, ladies. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Michelle, Ashley, and
Thank
Brooke.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.